Okay.
Yes.
Are we live? I think we're live. Yes. Okay, cool. Well, hey, everybody. This is my channel. I'm Nerdy Matt Reads. I guess let's go around and introduce ourselves.
Sure, I'll go first. My name is Amrita, and my booktube is called Amrita by the Book. Yeah.
I'm Lana from Lana X Libris.
And I'm Rosie, and I make videos at Rosie Cockshot.
All right.
And we're booktubers.
Yes.
Booktubers.
Yeah.
We did put that together. So we decided to buddy read ACOTAR together because none of us had ever read it before, and it is a very popular book. And we decided, just because this is kind of outside some of our comfort zones, to maybe stop at the halfway point and have this live discussion to see if possibly anyone wants to DNF or possibly try and change somebody else's opinion and to keep reading. We'll see how this goes. I think we all have a lot of thoughts.
Yeah.
A lot.
So I guess live show discussions usually start with like non-spoilery stuff, just in case anybody wants to hear some things but hasn't read the book. So does anybody have any non-spoilery thoughts they want to share?
Yeah, I think we were talking about this a minute ago, but I didn't realize that this was this recent because it simultaneously feels really old, like really dated is what I mean, as well as like it being relatively recent. Like that really messed with my head for some reason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This feels like the sort of book that when I was in my late teens was why I sort of stopped reading YA. But this came out like 5 years after I was in my late teens, so I'm kind of confused by that.
Yeah. I think it like has a similar feel to other popular books, like fantasy-wise, from like 2012. So I mean, I just finished reading all of the Shadow and Bone books, and I think it's kind of like it's got some similarities to that. One that I read a review of that pointed this out, and it's all I have in my head now, is that like this book is very similar to Twilight. And it's like, that's what it feels like. It's the new Twilight. But instead of, vampires and werewolves, it's fairies. And that's all I can think of it now as, is like, it's the new Twilight. That's why everybody loves it so much. And I don't get it because I didn't like Twilight either.
So I have a question. Like, would you classify this as fantasy or fantasy romance?
At the halfway point, it feels like fantasy romance to me because there's not...
We know nothing
and that's
about
one of the specific points I have. Yeah, we don't know anything about the world. There's not really any other story.
Yeah.
There's nothing else going on other than the romance. So I definitely expected this to be more fantasy, stuff's happening, action, plot movement, not just the romance side.
Yeah.
I was expecting, so I do like the Cruel Prince trilogy, and I did read the Red Queen series, which I didn't like as much, but I was expecting something of that caliber. Can I say that? When there's like a lot of plot, there's a very strong character who's very active when it comes to her fate, and here it's so passive. And she's described as this very like witty person who can, protect herself, and she's out to get the world, but she doesn't really do anything. It was so weird. And I expected a little more atmosphere, to be honest, because I knew that this was Fae, and the first book that I think of is Cruel Prince. And the atmosphere, how that book is written, you feel like you're in a fairy tale, which is a little dark and it's a little weird. And here you have these fairies, but you don't really get the atmosphere of, a fairyland. And then there are werewolves, there are wolves, there's bears, and it's like, what is happening?
Yeah.
I agree.
I agree.
There was a lot of points about the world where I was just like, what's what's going on here? What? And maybe this is me looking at it too much from like a set in something that's supposed to apparently be quasi-historical. Like it's fantasy, but we feel like it's got, they're wearing gowns and tunics and stuff. And then this is such a specific detail, but there's a lot of stuff like this that just throws me out, where it's like she's wearing modest, some sort of modest undergarments, but her stomach's exposed. I'm like, okay, but like, I want at least enough world building that I'm not confused and going, she's not wearing a bra because she's wearing a gown. So what's she wearing that's covering her? There's a lot of things like that where I just like, what's going on here?
Yeah. And also the beginning, first chapter I was reading, the note that I wrote, the first chapter is Hunger Games. It felt like I'm reading Hunger Games. And I was like, I thought this was like a fantasy romance, like in the woods with fairy tale fae princess. And it's not.
Yeah. I also agree that it's definitely like fantasy romance because, again, like the very lack of world building, and then when we did get some, it was just kind of like one paragraph dumped at you, and then it wasn't really ever explained. And so like I'm trying to like piece together how do all the high courts work, and like there's different ones based on like seasons and like times of day, but then just nothing else was ever given. And I was like, okay, so I guess that doesn't really matter then. Should we be focusing on the romance aspect? But I hated the romance aspect. Sorry to say, like little spoiler alert there for my thoughts. But I just, So I think this book has actually taught me that I don't like fantasy romance, because if I'm reading a fantasy book, I want more focus on the fantasy aspect. I can deal with a side romance plot. But if I'm reading a romance book, I want the sole focus to be the romance and like the development of the characters' feelings and like how their relationship progresses. And the 40% of the book that I read, I felt like I didn't have any of that. So that was like my biggest qualm with it.
So I've actually come around to like what Nat is saying too. Like I can't deal with fantasy romance any longer, I feel, because I have the same exact reaction to it. I keep waiting for the fantasy aspect to come through or the romance aspect to come through, and then I'm just mad that nothing's coming. And also like the fairy, like the beginning of this was clearly Beauty and the Beast, right? There's like the dad and then the sisters who are useless and the Hunger Games, but it was like Beauty and the Beast, but she's from the Hunger Games. And then all of a sudden,
Cinderella.
Yeah. And then there's this thing about like her sister wanting to marry a man, and then all of like absolutely apropos of nothing, he's just like, oh yeah, also like domestic violence runs in that family, don't marry him.
That was like so passive, and it was like, why wouldn't you tell her that sooner? Okay. Yeah, that was a weird scene.
But also I didn't understand the sister too. Like, why was the sister so insistent on marrying that guy? Like, it didn't seem like he had money. So why?
The entire family confused me so much because...
Me too.
It's like, obviously some families are terrible. Some families are just shitty people. Some families put their children in situations where they have to carry more than they need to. But we've got this like, I made a vow to my mother, and a vow is like a law, so like I can't go back on it. And again, maybe I'm just too old to be reading this, but I just kept thinking like, okay, well, if a vow is like a law and like a contract, how can a child make one that's binding? You were like 11 years old. Like,
that's a fair point. Yeah.
Oh my God.
And maybe that's just her personality, but like that whole situation just had me going like, I think we're supposed to see you as like the hardworking person who's doing everything and carrying everything, but it just didn't come across as favorable towards her either.
Yeah, like it felt like she just had a massive God complex, and like she just had to be the one taking care of everyone else. And like I understood her dad, can't really do as much. He's probably suffering from depression and things like that. And then I guess the one sister was just super hateful and was like, yeah, I resent being poor so much that I'm not going to do anything. So Feyre felt like she needed to do that. But then I don't know, as the story progressed and she just continuously was like, I need to take care of my family. I need to get back to them and help them and yada, yada, yada. Even when he tells her, oh, they're being taken care of, she still kind of has that mindset. And it's like, why?
And it's like she really liked it. She constantly was just like, oh, if you're not going to do this, you're gonna die. So I have to do this. If I'm not gonna do this, you're gonna die. But then she like loves that role so much. And she's like, I'm suffering, but I'm gonna do this.
Yeah.
Like me cleaning. I love to clean, but I also hate that I have to be the one to clean. Like, I'm gonna do this now, but I love it.
That's great.
I just want to say a quick hello to Lady Jane, who loves this book, and I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, we are like tearing it apart already.
Hi, Lady Jane. Oh, as to like what you said about being confused about the roles, there was a I don't know. I guess this is spoilery-ish, but when she finds out that Tamrin is the High Lord, like her reaction be like, High Lord, like, what does that change? Like, that means nothing to me. I don't understand. How is that different?
And she doesn't know anything either. Like, it's not like she has some deep understanding of how these courts and like the lords and stuff work. It's just like words. Oh, okay. Now I feel.
Or later she did mention something like, oh, like he's one of those who did these bad things, but then introduced these bad things before. So when you react, we react with you, because otherwise, like, okay, so what? Oh, I did like Lucien. I thought he was a much more interesting of a character. Just like more of him, more of that sass.
Yeah,
because, Tamrin was just
hot dude.
Stupid.
And it sounds like he has some interesting stuff going on, and like it feels like they're trying to tell us instead of showing that like he's interesting and deep and like he's got this burden that he carries, and it's like cool, but like I want to see some of that. I want to see what's going on in him, not just have him suddenly blurt out like, I'm in love with you because I relate to the fact that you have to carry a burden. It's like, where's this coming from?
Yes.
The spring court is full of rejects, apparently, from everywhere.
Yeah. And every single time he's in a scene, there's some mention that he is so dangerous. And remember, he's trained to kill, and he's blah, 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 and he's blah, blah, blah. But he is so nice. He does nothing bad. But she's like, oh, remember, he's a killer. And I'm like, chill, girl. Chill. And then she's so rude to him. This is a trope that I've been noticing a lot in YA romances and contemporary, like, YA everywhere. And maybe, listen, maybe this does happen to some people. It never happened to me. But if you're a girl and a guy is interested and you literally don't give him any clue that you might be interested to, or you're rude to him, or like you reject him, literally no guy will continue following you around and be like, but no, I love you. But no, I love you. I really like you. Like, they're not going to do that because no one has the time. And it's just so frustrating.
And if they do, then they're basically creeps, because we don't want that.
We don't. Yeah, and the fact that she's so rude to him and so weird, and he's just like, wow, a human. She's so cute. I don't get it.
Yeah, and with him like being so nice to her, that was like my biggest issue throughout the story. Was like it just felt as though it lacked logic. Like, it's supposed to be a Beauty and the Beast retelling, and the whole thing starts with her killing a fairy who is Tamlin's like best friend, and he's like, yeah, I'm gonna either kill you or you can come live in my palace and like nothing will happen. And it was like, what? That's stealing a flower, killing somebody, not the same thing right there. But like, then when he's living there and he's so nice to her and she's so mean to him, and then again it was like, this feels like it should be reversed. She killed his friend, he shouldn't like her. That was like my biggest issue, because I just didn't understand the mindset these characters were supposed to have given the plot that was told to us.
especially because like later on there's that fairy that like dies, and we're just moving into spoiler territory here, so I'm sorry for the people who haven't read it yet, but it's been years. Everyone is talking about this on booktube and bookstagram, so I don't know how you could avoid being spoiled. So I'm just going to launch into it right now. But there's this fairy that gets killed and it's like basically bleeding out to death at her feet. And she's just like, oh no, that's terrible, you know, like nobody should have to die alone. And I'm like, didn't you just kill one? Like, what are you talking about? But apparently, like, if you're a fairy and you have wings, then you're special and deserve protection. But if you're like an ugly fairy, then you deserve death, you know.
Yeah. It was a very sad scene, though. I almost cried.
Yeah, it was an emotional scene. Like, it was well written. Farah's like comments were just so unnecessary to me.
I'm sorry, is he Tamlin or Tamrin? Because
Tamlin.
Okay, I need to rewrite these notes.
No, but the names in this book are like extra special too, because her name is like Farah, and I just kept waiting for somebody to be like, your name is Farah.
So I'm listening to the audiobook, and the pronunciation of her name is probably like 15% of why I don't like this book, because everyone says it really like Farah, and I don't even know how it's spelled, but it's just like something about it like grates on my ears now.
That's great. That's like such a specific thing to audiobooks, but like I understand that. I totally get that.
Sorry. Also, the amount of times they mentioned like cauldrons without referencing anything else, I was just like, is this Harry Potter? What is a cauldron? I just saw like witches in their like pointy hats, and I'm like, this is not this world. Why is everyone talking about cauldrons? Oh God, it was just so funny every time.
And
holy cauldron!
Oh God. She did not read that out loud when she was writing it. Like she had like no idea how that sounded when she was writing it. I can promise you. Oh, yeah, no.
Does anybody want to talk about some positives they have from the story?
Okay, I do have positives actually. Like I noticed this about Sarah J. Maas when I was reading. So I've only read Crescent City. That's the other her adult fantasy romance that she wrote. I think that was
a standalone, right?
No, it's the start of the series, I think. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There's so few standalones left in fantasy. I really don't understand why, except it's like a marketing thing, and it's one of my pet peeves. But so I've read the Crescent City one, and I don't know why I read it before I read this one, especially because I already had this book. Like I bought it pretty much as soon as it was published, and then I never read it. But anyway, this is how it works. And I did notice that even in that one, she had like a really good sense of pace. And she doesn't, well, I don't know if this is going to be true for the rest of the book, but up to the point where I read, she does keep up the pace of like things happening and the plot progressing. And I feel like that's something that sometimes in fantasy romance, I don't really see that, because it just gets really involved in the two leads just having sex or making out or whatever. Whereas in this one, the plot was progressing, and I appreciate that as a reader.
Yeah.
I think I have a slightly different perspective, and maybe it's from listening. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting better in like the second quarter. I found the first quarter really like could have picked up the pace for me. It felt like a very long time of like, I'm going to try and escape, but I'm not ready yet. I'm going to try and escape, but I'm not ready. I'm going to try and escape, but I haven't made any plan. I'm going to try and escape, but I'm, forgetting that I'm in fairyland, and obviously that's not my disabled father who's somehow made it all this. I think once the relationship started, okay, then I was like, okay, I don't like what's happening, but at least things are happening.
Yeah.
But
the escape plan was especially stupid to me, just because I was like, girl, how? Like, what is the plan exactly? Because she was just really focused on tiny details, like, I'm going to wear pants and not a dress because it's easier to run away in a pair of pants, which I was like, good thinking, but
You don't have a map.
You don't know where you are or how to get back, and he has magic, and he's already tracked her down once without ever having met her. Now he knows who she is. How are you going to escape that exactly? And also, like, she's thinking through it, like she's like thinking about, like, oh, like, if we go and we do manage to escape, then we won't have a home, we won't have jobs, we will have no money, we'll have to like starve to death. And I'm just like, yes. So what is your plan exactly?
Yeah, I find this in, I want to say a lot, not that I read a lot of like YA fantasy stuff, but there's always like, we need to escape. And it's like, can you sit down a second and think first, than just rushing to escape? Because that's so frustrating. Just sit and think. And also, maybe this is just me being me, and I would have acted very differently. And I like information. I like knowing what's happening. Why can't she sit one of those servants down, write down, tell me, well, she can't write, but like, tell me everything about fairies. What's outside of here? What can people do? What should I know? I've never been here before. I don't know this world. Or like, Talon, you don't want me to die. Tell me about your world. Why is it dangerous? What should I not do? Like, she has no information and she doesn't ask for it.
Yeah, she would much rather trap some fairy creature and get the answers from them. Like,
that scene was so weird because it was just like, it felt like I got what she was doing, but it was just like, what pushed you to do that? Like, again, like what Lana was saying, it would make so much more sense if she just tried to sit down and talk with, one of the servants who live here. But, that's too logical for like a YA book.
Well, like, hey, you want to get bigger answers, but before the big questions, ask the small ones so you know what's happening. Oh God. But like the thing, you guys not all of you got to the 50th percent mark, to the end of chapter 21, right?
I got to the end of chapter 23, so yeah.
So what really irked me was, well, Tamlin, I didn't like him just because he's like the alpha male who is super silent, and like he's kind, but he's silent and mysterious. And every time we have like a description that he's, built for like fighting and killing, and like his body, he's so much of his body. Oh my God. But
oh my gosh,
every interaction was like nice, and he was kind to her. And yes, he's like this big burly man, but he's also a sweetheart. But then closer to chapter 21, we get to see in a more like, it's not even a romance way, but more like sexual interaction between them, like a little hint of it. And he was definitely very like brutal, aggressive, like, you do this and don't disobey me and blah, blah, blah. And like, that was still no for me. I guess I don't like alpha males in books.
That scene really... Sorry,
Rosie.
That scene really bothered me in many ways. Partly because I was like, yeah, I don't know how you want me to see him as like the romantic lead when he's acting this way. That's not my thing, but whatever. But like, it was just another situation of like, she does something stupid that she's explicitly told, like, it's not safe, don't do this.
And she does.
She does it. And then, like, what he did wasn't right, but then she's mad at him about it. And it's like, I get being mad, but also, like, literally, we're told it is not safe. Don't leave your room. Leave room. Mad that there are consequences.
Yeah, guys, I don't know how far you've gone. Basically, there's like some kind of festival evening and everyone's preparing for it. And he tells her, don't go, you're not invited. And she's like, oh no, there's a party, I'm not invited, which is so dumb. Like, there must be a reason he told you to stay in your room, don't leave your room. Not just like, don't come to our party, you can hang out with us. And so she's at home and she's like, you know what? No, it sounds fun. People are talking. There's like a bonfire. I want to go hang out with people. And stuff happens. She's returned home by Lucien, who's like, bitch, stay home.
And he then explains like exactly why it is not safe for her to be out.
And then she's like, well, I woke up. It's 2 a.m. The night is over because 2 a.m. That's morning, right? She's like, I'm just gonna go. Yeah, I'm gonna go get a snack. Idiot.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, and then he's like, "Oh, I smelled you, and you were not there," and it was so disgusting. She was like, I like this." Which was even worse.
Yeah.
That's just extra special, given that up until that point, she's just been talking about how she's deathly afraid of all the Fae, and they're all out to kill her and like poison her, etc., etc. And then apparently, this one day, when everybody's gonna be there, and it's literally not safe for her, she's like,
and it's all about like, I'm not invited, and she like, it's repeated in her mind. Her words are like, you are not invited, and she's like, oh, I'm not invited. Like, how old are you? How old is she? Because then she's like,
good question. I'm confused because she felt like she was 19. Like 16.
Yeah, like I think. Well, because okay, so with ACOTAR, I think this is a fascinating conversation in terms of like the age range, because the first book is YA, technically speaking. Like that's why I think you can equate it to Twilight fairly well, because it's like a YA book. There's not any explicit smut in it. I asked people who've actually read it. I don't know this from personal experience, but the future books I know do eventually dive into like darker topics and actually have like full-on smut scenes. And so it's like transitioning into new adult. And then when they redid all of the covers, they're trying to start marketing it towards actual adult romance books. And it's so weird because it's like, again, the first book is YA. And even though I'm fairly certain I read she was supposed to be like 19. Again, Rosie, like you said, she reads like she's 16. And I think it's that whole thing of like, she wants it to be older because she was like gearing up to go towards a like more explicit romance story for the future of the series. But then like the first book, as Sarah J. Maas was a YA author, she still has to make it somehow feel YA. And like, I thought that was a really interesting topic of discussion when you look at like how the whole series has been marketed and how it's changed as it's come out.
Yeah, interesting. I knew that some of the other later books are like known for the smut, so the whole time it's just like, where's the sex? Apparently there's none. Okay, continue.
No, I think like that's actually something that it's becoming more and more obvious. Like they used to be, like Sarah J. Maas, I think probably did it right, so to speak, you know, like she took her time and she cultivated her audience, and then she sort of, you know, it's the same thing as Harry Potter, right? Like if you look at the first couple of books, they're definitely middle grade, and then as the books, you know, age up with the audience, basically that's what's happening. And I think Sarah J. Maas did basically the same thing, but I feel like she created a template for a lot of young adult fantasy romance writers, where now it's just becoming really obvious that a lot of these people don't really want to be writing YA, and they're just doing it because it's a big market and they can just mine it.
Yeah.
And I think it's becoming a point of concern for me, I think, because I'm like, every time I pick up a YA book, I have to kind of I find myself doing much more research for YA than I do for any other kind or any other age range of books that I read, because I never know if it's going to be one of those books that is technically YA, but is actually just adults, you know, in little kitty bodies, because I don't particularly want to read about 16-year-olds having really explicit sex. Like, I mean, if that, I know that that's the age of legal consent in certain countries, and more power to them, etc. But I don't really want to be reading that. So it's concerning for me.
And apart from just the whole sexual topic, just, I don't know, me as a 27-year-old, I don't really want to read books about 16-year-old people, because they make different kind of decisions. They don't they just have a different brain. And I think in fantasy, it's easier to do a YA and make your character younger, because in a made-up world, when they don't have the same kinds of school and whatever, and sort of understanding of by what age should you know what and behave a certain way, it's easier to just do whatever, because she was a survival, she had to hunt, so yeah, she's 16, but she's also very wise and worldly because she had to go through trauma and whatever. So you can really stretch whatever. And the purpose of making her, I don't know, 17, 16, is, I don't know, to market it as YA. I don't know.
I feel like there's a little bit, and maybe I just don't read enough in fantasy, but almost of a gender divide in it, where it's female protagonists. I feel like I see that way more in YA. And then adult fantasy seems to be way more male-oriented. And I wonder if some of the weirdness is people trying to being told if you want female protagonist fantasy, you need to sell it at teenage girls because they're the ones who are going to buy it. And yeah, that's sort of we need to figure out how to cross these so that things can find their right place.
Maybe. Also, sorry. Go on.
No, I think just going back to Rosie's point, I think that is a good point. I think traditionally, fantasy genders male, it skews towards male readers, etc., which is really insane to me, because I didn't grow up knowing that about fantasy, so I was just reading everything, and I was just hey, this is great. But also, I think over the past couple of years, I've begun to see a lot of fanfic writers who typically tend to be female, and young adult writers, again, female authors, making the transition into fantasy, and sort of straddling that ground between fantasy and fantasy romance, and sort of blurring the distinctions and doing a really good job of it as well. And it's also leading to more queer stories being told in the fantasy genre, which traditionally, if you look at classic fantasy, that's we don't see a lot of that, which why not? Because these are people have dragons and shit, why can't they have a boyfriend? But
whoa,
I need that on a t-shirt, by the way. Yeah.
You love dragons, why can't they have a boyfriend?
But I feel over the past couple of years, I've seen that shift gradually begin to happen. And I feel we are due. And I think that's also why there's been such a big pushback from the more conservative factions of the fantasy genre and the SFF genre in general, with the whole the puppygate thing and stuff. And I think that's because they don't like it. The traditional block of people, they don't like it, and they want to see something that's more cishet and more male. And now all these other people are coming in and being no, rainbows and boyfriends for everybody. And it's upsetting people, and I don't care.
Yeah. What I was gonna say is also, why does Tamlin have to be so old? And if you're that old, would you be interested in a 16-year-old girl?
One of my biggest pet peeves as an adult reading these books, reading fantasy books with some 1,500-year-old character, and it's that is creepy as shit. No, I hate that. I hated it in Throne of Glass. I hated it in Shadow of Bone. I don't get it, and I don't like it. I understand where it came from with like when we had the vampire thing going on. And like, I try and block that out. I mean, I love the TV show Angel. I try to forget the fact that a 200-year-old dated a 16-year-old. I push that away from my brain. And it makes me so uncomfortable. Like, why can't we ever have a like 2,000-year-old immortal being falling in love with a 40-year-old? More like accurate maturity. It's just more normal. Sorry, that's a soapbox for me. It gets me heated.
No, and I agree, because when I was a teenager, that shit was awesome. Because when you're a teenager, older people are in general like, you know, not 16-year-old guys, so like a big improvement. But also, like, 30 seems kind of weird. Your teacher's 30, so you want someone who looks like they're 20 but is actually 200, and it makes sense. But yeah, as an adult, it's just kind of like,
it's so weird.
Just, if I were interacting with a 16-year-old, I'd be like, okay, you're an actual child. Do you need to go to bed? Do I need to get you a snack? Like, what's going on?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, somebody should have gotten Farah a snack, as we just discussed. We should have gotten her a snack.
Just give her a cookie, give her a juice box, put her to bed. Like, oh, and then we could go party.
Yeah. It's just, I think I was thinking about this, like, where did this maybe start? And I think the idea of, if we take even like Edward Cullen, right? Who knows how many years he has. It's because you get like a 17-year-old looking guy who doesn't have to deal with the same things you have to deal with, meaning school and teachers and where you're going to apply for college and, oh, my parents don't allow me to blah, 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 blah. Like, you're an adult, meaning that you are free to do whatever you want. You're not you don't have to abide by the rules of being someone in their parents' care. And I think that's what's exciting, that they don't have to answer to their parents. They don't have to worry about college or whatever. And like the high school things of, oh, if I don't get an A, it'll be like the end of the world. Like, that doesn't apply to them. They have like bigger issues. And I think that's what's exciting. But I even wrote a note about Lucien when he was saying something about how mortals are idiots. I said, in his defense, if I were super old, I'd also think everyone was an idiot.
Yeah, actually.
Like, nothing.
I would actually love to read a book like that, though, where, there's like a 2,000-year-old and a 15-year-old, and the 15-year-old is like, oh my God, you're so amazing. And then the 2,000-year-old's like, you're such an idiot. Like, why are you talking to me?
That would be a good time.
Yeah.
Nat, did you like something? I feel like we started out with that question and then we never got to you.
Oh, yeah, no worries. So one thing I liked it, but I also had not complaints, but I guess was just like, that's odd. I appreciated how whenever she would introduce like a new fairy, most of them were actually based on like folklore like beings. So like the Puka who masqueraded as her father, like that's actually a Celtic folklore thing. It's not a fairy. I think it's like closer to an elf, but it like shapeshifts. Or the Surreal was actually, that's like an angel in Jewish culture. I don't want to say mythology, that sounds weird, but like Jewish culture. And then there's one more. The
Nagas. Yeah, those are also a real thing.
Hindi and Buddhist, I want to say. I'm not sure. I think that's it. But like, I thought that was really interesting how she was kind of playing on folklore beings to tie into her fantasy worlds. And I just, because that's not something like you really get exposed to unless you actively seek it out. Like, I know that stuff from listening to a folklore podcast, but I thought that was something interesting to kind of add into YA fantasy to, get people interested in that sort of stuff. But at the same time, I also thought it was weird that with using those things, she was calling them different fairies, and in reality, like, none of them are fairies. Again, a Puka is like an elf, the Suriel is like an angel, a Naga is like a half-human serpent thing. So it's like weird, but I liked where her brain was going with it. And it it was one part of the world building that I thought was more interesting, and I would have liked to see more of that in the future, because I'm sure there would be more explanations of other fairies and all, especially since I didn't get that Tamlin was like a werewolf fairy thing. Like
Yeah.
that was weird. But yeah,
I feel that confused because we only see this fairyland from the inside of this, I don't know, palace, where they're just these two guys who are the, you know, aristocrats, whatever. They have servants, and then outside of this place, there are all these different fairies who all look different, who all have different powers, and they're all dangerous and out to get them. And to me, it's just like, I don't understand the world, because all I know is this one house with these 3 people living in it, and they have servants. And I don't know what are fairies. What is like the average fairy? What does it do? Does it like
does this
own
world
a
work?
shop? Like how? Yes. Is there?
They
an
seem to
economy
exist just to like attack Tamlin's borders. But like, why
Yeah.
are they attacking Tamlin's borders? Why are they trying to get in? Maybe there's a reason. What's going on? Yeah.
Yeah. Is there trading? Is there money? Like, is there a town where people live? Is it just
If it's always
aristocrats and servants?
if it's always spring here and always summer there, how are they growing anything? Like, they've got all this food. Where's it coming from?
Yeah.
Can I confess something?
Yeah.
Did you write it? Are you Sarah J.
So I am not going to be reading this book any further. Like, I'm going to DNF. I'm going to be like very upfront about this. Like, we'll come to this later, I bet. But like, let me just say why I did this. But I'm not going to be finishing this book. So when I decide not to finish a book, I do this thing where I just skim ahead on my Kindle and just quickly take a peek at like how everything ended. So I actually do know how this book ends based upon the things that I skimmed through. So I'm a bad person. I realize that and I acknowledge it fully. But I'm going to say in defense of Sarah J. Maas that she does acknowledge that there are, like, she's basically setting certain things up for the ending. Whether she does it well, I don't know, because I didn't actually read it per se. I was just like, what happens here? What happens here? What happens here? So, yeah.
So we do get some answers.
Yes.
Oh, but like, will I continue reading this book? I don't know. I'm also listening to the audiobook, so I don't know how big the actual book is. But when you don't get answers for so long, will you get to the ending to get the answers, you know? Because nothing really, I was considering continuing just because I'm listening to an audiobook and it's not a hardship. I'm not, having to sit down and read it. I'm doing other stuff. And it's like, it's not offending me in any way. It's a little stupid. It's entertaining, I guess. I kind of wonder, what other stupid thing will she do next? But that thing that I mentioned with him acting brutal to her and she liking it, I didn't like that. So I may not be continuing. And I forgot what was I trying to say? I don't know.
Will it be worth it? Having waited so long.
I don't know.
I actually have a question about that particular scene, Lana. I haven't read it. Not gonna read it.
I can tell you all about it.
But I have a question. Like, I feel like I have read a disturbing number of YA books or YA romances in which you see that trope where it's not rape and it's not sexual violence, but it is dubcon and it is aggressive. And is it just something that I've been reading, or have like you guys noticed it as well?
This particular scene was not dubcon because nothing like actually happens. It's just like you get a sense of what their sexual interaction would be like. So I don't know. I've not really read many explicit fantasy romances. The ones that I mentioned, they don't really have explicit sex. So
I just because it's again the most recent like series that I read. With like the Shadow and Bone series, I can kind of like make a connection between like the Darkling and Alina with like the same kind of power dynamic. It seems that Lana was talking about with Tamlin and Feyre, and I do think that's become like a more popular thing. And like I don't know what it ties back to, but part of me wants to say that might be the reason that the whole like joking daddy kink thing has gotten so popular again. Like, is it because in like media now that we keep popularizing the whole like dominating alpha male as being like the perfect partner and all? And like, is that part of why 50 Shades of Grey got as popular as it did? I have no idea. But like, I do think that's an interesting thing to look into. And like for me personally, I don't mind it in books, but it's not something like I like overly enjoy. So that was like one of the things I didn't like in the Hating Game was that the love interest was very like dominating and manhandly and stuff like that. And it's like, I don't know, this just feels a little weird where you, especially when you don't know what the girl is into, it's even more weird because it feels kind of non-consensual at that point. And like, it's not rapey, but it's definitely like riding that line of this could get problematic very easily.
That's an element that comes up for me a lot is I'm not inherently against that type of dynamic in media or in real life, you know, consent standing, of course, but I feel like lately, and I don't know what else I've seen in them, but it does feel kind of familiar that like it's like the first encounter. And that's like if it was an established relationship, we've, you know, seen them have discussions, we've seen them build their relationship a bit. Okay, yeah, the kind of domineering, manhandling stuff, I'm okay with that if it's kind of established, but this sort of like, we've not even acknowledged that we like each other and I'm going to pin you to a wall with my claws, which like, just, I'm sorry. Legit, like he's got claws in the wood, like holding her hands in place.
That's creepy. Oh my God.
It's, yeah. Like,
yeah, so
just, you know, yeah.
that scene, the thing that was happening in the festival, basically there's some kind of magic rite, whatever, and Tamlin turns into like an animalistic himself. Like he's not in his mind, he becomes like an animal thing, but he's like stays in human form, and he has to have sex with some maiden. And he will not be gentle, he will be rough because he's an animal at that point. And he smelled her, and then he came to her at like 2 a.m. being like, you were not there and I smelled you, and it was just like so gross because it's not even him as himself being this. It's more like, I don't have my inhibitions, and without my inhibitions I am this, which was disturbing. And what Rosie, what you said, that's the thing that really frustrates me is I don't mind, like, people do whatever you want, whatever you're into, awesome, that's, more power to you. But it is that first encounter where the man acts a certain way, and me, the reader, and me, Lana, who's also very sensitive to certain things, I like react a certain way, being like, no, like, or just combative, whatever. But the female is just like, yes, this is awesome. Finally, someone is so like animalistic towards me and wants me so much. Like it triggers a fear response in me. And it's very hard being in that fear response and reading from the perspective of the girl who's like, yeah, that's awesome. Let's do this more. Like that's hard to do for me. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, that makes total sense.
Kind of like on the same line, but like on the opposite side, sort of. The first, like, I guess, romantic moment that there is between Tamlin and Feyre, and I'm gonna be honest right now, that scene was where I stopped because I was just like, there's been no development to this. This makes no sense to me. Or at least how I've been reading the book. I'll put it that way. Like I was listening to the audiobook.
Is it the swim?
So they were in the garden, they're talking, and it was like, wow, we're like actually having some decent communication here. Cool. And she rips out a rose and like her hand starts bleeding, and Tamlin just like takes it and kisses it. And I was like, Where did that come from? Like, I would have been fine with that scene if we had had a bit more development beforehand. And I think that ties back with my whole thing with not really being a fantasy romance fan, is because I feel like we've been kind of riding the line between sort of focused on romance, sort of focused on the fantasy part. And it's like, I wanted more before we started to actually dive into them becoming like, or not even becoming a couple, but like starting to court each other, where like we really haven't seen all that much between them.
It felt to me like it was very much steps instead of a slope. Mm-hmm. It was sort of like, okay, now we're in this stage. It's like, okay, but how did we get here? And okay, now we're going to be here for a little while. And now we jump, as opposed to feeling like they're developing over time and getting to know each other. And, it felt like sort of like we went from like, I hate you, I barely tolerate you, to I'm weirdly kissing your blood hand.
Yeah, your blood hand.
Yeah, that little description that
like
he had
hand contact and like gaze lingering type phase before we get to that.
Yeah, and like maybe it's because I love enemies to lovers, so like I have very specific interests in how that's written, and just for me, I didn't have enough development from enemies to friends section for us to just automatically be like, woohoo, we're going into like sexy times.
They also didn't feel like enemies, because she was the only one who was combative. She was just, live in my house for free. You want paints? I'll give you paints. You want food? Here's food. Do whatever you fucking want. Like, that's not an enemy.
Yeah, she had my dream life and she was mad. Like,
yes.
What?
Yeah.
I also thought that the painting thing would play out like more significantly. Like, they make such a big deal of it at the beginning, like, oh, like she's a painter, she wants to leave her mark in the world, like this is the big talent and nobody appreciates it, and now she's here. So I thought like it would have like some deep meaning to the fairies that she could paint. And then it turned out he was just like, hey, you want some paper and some paint? I'll get it for you. And I was just like, what just happened?
Also, here's a gallery that literally no one cares about, and like it can be yours. Like, no one cares about art here, so you have fun.
Fairies, we're just like humans.
It was supposed to give her some more characterization. Some like, oh, how is she different? What kind of interest does she have? But it's like, you can't just do one interest and that's it. Like, no, give her something else.
That was one of my big issues with the book. I felt like halfway in, I don't know who Farah is.
She felt like
Bella she's Swan stubborn. If you tell her to do one thing for her own safety, she's going to do the other. She likes to paint. She's got a real chip in her. Like, the biggest actual interesting character trait I found was, the understandable inferiority complex and that feeling like she's not good enough and everyone's judging her, and like that would have been interesting. But
be very what's that word? Like, any young girl can like read this and see herself in it and just like, oh, I really like painting, just put something else on top of that. That's not important to the plot. But I feel like, and even in other things too, like I'm a songwriter, so something that I've learned that if you're trying to be very generic to appeal to everyone, it's not gonna appeal to anyone. So like, be detailed, make a detailed character, make a detailed something, because that will, like, people will really feel and understand. Because if it's generic, no one's gonna feel anything. And that's what I felt with her. I felt like she's just like any girl who's 17 years old and likes a werewolf type of person.
It was like, what do they call it? Self-insert fan fiction.
Yeah. And like, she has a hobby and she's a painter, but like that doesn't actually have any, she doesn't, I don't know. How was she? Sorry.
Go ahead, Lana.
How was she from like a very like high society merchant family and not be able to write at 12 years old? 12 years old?
She said like her mom just never like educated her, basically, I think was the explanation there, which like again, I think that would be more interesting if we dived more into like her backstory, because it seems she had a very interesting relationship with her mom. Like there was definitely some stuff going on there that this girl probably needs therapy for.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, again, it's the first book in the series. I only got 40% in. It probably does get dived in more later on, but like, I don't know. I think it would have helped in developing Farrah's character for us to understand her more if that had been a bit more explained.
Yeah, because I don't really understand. Like, she doesn't make sense to me. She has this inferiority thing, which also doesn't really, like, you're so proud of yourself for providing for your family. Like, you really are like, I'm a hunter. I'm so cool. My whole family depends on me. But then with Fairy, she's like, oh, of course, mortals are blah, blah, blah. Like, she's just, I don't understand. Like, pick one thing, please.
So I haven't, like I said, I don't plan to read the second half, but I'm going to say that Mo is probably correct because the parts that I skimmed, it's a completely different book. So, so I was just like, I was reading, I was just skimming through the end, and I was literally like, who are these people? Where are we? And what is happening here? Because it's a completely different thing than anything that we have actually gone through. So
that actually sounds really promising for my likelihood of finishing, because one of the things I've been feeling so far is there's a lot of interesting story here. We're just not looking at it. Like, what's this magical blight? Magic is going wrong? What's going on? Like, yes, tell me more about that. Tell me more about Lucian and his, like, going around to the courts. Hell, tell me more about the random mercenary in one chapter at the very beginning who buys wolf pelts. Like, she sounded like an amazing character.
That sounded cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also with the blight thing, with like whatever's happening with their magic, this is such a random detail, and I knew why it was put in there because, again, Beauty and the Beast retelling. If he's going to be a beast, naturally she can't actually see his face, and it's too close to bestiality for him to be a wolf the entire time. So we're going to have him wear a mask. And I don't know why, but I thought that was the funniest thing when I read it. I was just like, what? Like, it just, again, I totally understand like what she was doing in terms of it being a Beauty and the Beast retelling there, but I don't know. I guess I was like, she couldn't have taken like a Teen Wolf route where he's kind of a wolf, but he also kind of still looks human. Like, different strokes, different folks, like different ideas. But I just thought it was so funny.
She fell in love with his biceps, so she doesn't need a face.
So I actually had to read that passage like a couple of times because the first time I read it, I don't know why, but I thought she said that the mask was like grafted onto his face. And I was just like, wow, that sounds really, I was like, wow, I did not expect this book to go that way. And then I was like, wait, that can't be right. And then I went back and read it, and it was just like a half mask. And I was like, oh, all right.
I also see like very cheap, like very cheap plastic gold masks. Not even those that they used in not Gilmore Girls, what am I saying? Gossip Girl, those ugly, very like ornamental, that you can see the face completely. There's no purpose to them. Oh, yikes. So how do they wash their faces?
They don't, apparently.
Yikes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, with the blight thing, I couldn't understand why was she so insistent on like letting her family know? Because like, first of all, you don't even know what that is. So like, what are you gonna tell them? Second of all, what will they do with the information? There's literally nowhere to go. They live in one town. So that was just like, why? Why do you need to do this?
I guess my question to all of you is like, do you okay, so we've all had some very strong reactions to this book, right? But do you think
all positive?
But do you like have any understanding for the people who like love it and literally have turned, because I follow people on Bookstagram especially who basically their account is like 90% about the series. and like 10% other stuff, but 90% of their content is entirely ACOTAR themed. Maybe not specifically this book, but the series. Do you have like any understanding? Because sometimes, you read a book and you're like, well, okay, this is not for me, but I get why people really love it.
I get why people who read it when it first started coming out are in love with it, because I can see if I had read this when I was 15 or maybe even when I was 20, and especially if the second one is actually a lot better and maybe a bit more actually adult, not sort of halfway in between. I can see having that, like, because you've liked it from that period in your life, you still like it now type reaction. I don't think I see why an adult reading it now would fall in love with it, but maybe I'm biased because I don't like it.
I can definitely see this as, like, series, like TV series that people adore, and that have like several, let's say, I don't know, seasons or episodes, and then you try to watch the pilot and you're like, this is shit. This is what it feels like to me. Like, it's not one book that you read and you're like, yes. Maybe a few years ago, when there were not as many options for other, maybe better crafted YA fantasy romances. Again, Cruel Prince is so much better. But then when you read the second book, and maybe, I don't know how many books there are of this, 3, 5, 6?
I think 5 now.
I think.
Well, maybe after
there's
while.
3, there's a novella, and then there's the newest one, I think.
Well, there you go. Like, if the second one is so much better and you've spent some time in this world, you understand it better, you're more enveloped in it, and maybe like you love the series overall, and not necessarily you're like, oh, this first book was so cool. Yeah, there you go. Like, it's a long time to spend in one world and feel indifferent to it. So maybe if you didn't like the first one and you continued on, by the third one, you're a fan. That makes sense. Like, I have TV shows that I love that, like, the first few episodes or like the first season was terrible, but I love that series,
Yeah,
I feel like that's
fair.
something.
Yeah. I do agree with that, like with what you're saying. I'll, like, first thought, Parks and Rec. I hate the first season. I always skip over it, but like I love that series. So like I totally understand that. And I can also see with what Rosie was saying, absolutely. Like, if you read this when you're like a teenager, like on the younger side, and you fall in love with it, you're going to continue to love it as you move forward, even if you can realize like it's not perfect. Like, I know plenty of people do that with Cassandra Clare books. They fell in love with it as a teenager, and like they still love and adore and read the series, but like as an adult, they can understand like it's not perfect. Again, back to what I was saying previously, I do think it kind of scratches that same itch that like Twilight did for a lot of people, where it's this forbidden romance kind of thing in a not quite contemporary world, but like this is more where at that point paranormal is really popular. Right now fantasy is really popular, and so it's still got that like fantasy feel. And I mean, plenty of people love fantasy, and 9 times out of 10 fantasy usually has some kind of a romantic subplot. And I know I can't be the only one who reads a romantic subplot and be like, I've needed this to be a lot more popular, or a lot more prevalent in the story. So I guess that kind of showcases why fantasy romance is starting to become such a bigger thing, where it still gives you that fantasy world and that fantasy feel, but like the romance plotline that everybody loves is the main focus, or more prevalent focus is on it, at least. And I totally get like other people can enjoy that and can like split their attention between the fantasy half and the romance half. Just like for me personally, I don't do that. I don't like it like that. I want more of a focus on the fantasy in this one, because I do think she is setting up an interesting world. It's just like, even if she info dumped, I wouldn't be too mad, because I would actually start to understand what's happening in this fairy kingdom thing more. And then you info dump.
I think more emphasis on the fantasy part, at least for me, would also help the romance part. Like, if we were seeing more of this fantasy story plotline side, and things are developing there, and, we're thrown together because we're fighting something, for actual plot reasons, I think I'd be a lot more likely to get engaged in the story of their relationship, because it feels like it's actually happening through things, not just their relationship happening. That's a terribly worded sentence, but
no, it does make sense. And there's such a good, there's such a great opportunity because she is someone who doesn't know anything about this world. We get to learn with her, but she is not learning. Because you get to like find out with her. She gets to ask the questions that we want to ask. She's in that position, but she's just not doing that for some reason.
Yeah, and also with the romance of this one, like I kind of did the same thing, Amrita, but instead of skimming through the book, I went and read a bunch of reviews and then literally found a ACOTAR Wikipedia page and like just straight was like, okay, come on, what happens? I need to know, but I'm not going to do it. Actually, side tangent real quick. My friends and I are going to have a PowerPoint night on random topics, and one of my friends is going to do the entire ACOTAR series to explain it all to me.
I love it. This is the kind of friend I need.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Anyway, but with the romance part, I totally lost my train of thought.
Oh, you said that you were skimming.
Oh, with the romance part, yes. Yeah. So I like looked it up, and I do know that as the series progresses, the romance, like not just smut and stuff, but like the literal plot line and like everything involved changes very drastically. And I am curious that I don't think I will continue the series, but if I were to continue the series, if I would like it a lot more in like the third book compared to what we were getting in this one. And I know that's being very vague, and I'm kind of doing that on purpose just in case anybody continues or anybody in like watching hasn't read all of the series, but
well, it does make sense though, because I don't feel like I got even if I can finish the first one, I don't feel like I know what this fandom is about, because I feel like just reading the first book is not enough to understand. It's like, again, I'm gonna put it back to TV shows, like the amount of times I showed my sister The Office first episode, the pilot, she's just like, I don't like it. I don't understand. Like, no, you have to get used to the humor. You have to understand, like you have to get into the vibe of it to understand it. I feel like just one book here is not going to do that for me. I need to read the rest to understand. And I feel like I just cannot judge this whole series by the first 50%. Because maybe it doesn't matter.
I think like my problem is that for that to happen, like for me to stick with a particular arc, I need to know that the characters are worth my time, and that I need to like them enough to invest that amount of time in following their story. And if I don't like them even a little bit in the beginning, then I can't really see myself investing that amount of time, because there's just so much to read, and it's really good stuff to read. It's not like there's a drought of like good books to read out of the world. So I really need something about either the world or the characters or something to grab me, so that I'm like, okay, I want to see how this particular character turns out. And I am not above skimming whatsoever, as I've just confessed. So I will 100% do that thing where I'm just like, oh, if I like this character, but I couldn't really care for the arc in the first book, I'll pick up the second book and just see what happened to that character in the second book. I'm also not above Wikipedia sleuthing, just like Matt. I will do it. But it has to be something that I'm just like, oh, like, okay, this is like something that I'm interested in. And I feel like I've either read, okay, I don't know if I've read this. I did not do the Wikipedia sleuthing, which I will after this video. But I feel like just through osmosis on Bookstagram, I have a feeling this becomes a love triangle at some point, which I hate. I don't like it.
I don't know because I haven't skimmed ahead at all, but I feel like the person who it's going to be a love triangle with is introduced. And as soon as he was, I think I have a note that says, like, I was just getting on board with this one relationship.
Is that guy? Rosie, is that guy?
That's my guess. The dark, it's so like, oh, he's blonde and he's dark haired. And I'm like, oh.
I know, but I'm not going to say.
My question is, are all the series following her and her relationships? Because I see a lot of like fan art on Bookstagram, and just the name Nesta is one that I'm very familiar, and like, well, she must have a big comeback.
Yeah, the most recent book. I do know she becomes a bigger character in the rest of the series, but in the most recent one that just came out, the Silver Flames, Nesta was the main character. So like that's kind of why she's become even more prevalent, is because she was the main character in that one. She's
because now I'm confused. So are we following 3 books of Feria and her love, and she won't get like a happy ever after with the love of her life until the end of the 3rd book? Or is every book a different sister or whatever? Because I don't know if I want to read a love story that lasts 3 books.
There's only so much
I have in the past that I loved, but am I ready to do this again with a book that I'm not super like into? So A Court of Silver and Flames is dual perspective.
Okay.
Totally irrelevant side note. It pisses me off so much that the 4th novel and the 5th book in the series, she just suddenly dropped the A Court of and.
Yeah.
And now it's just
it like totally messes with the flow.
Why would my brain can't handle this?
Oh, did she?
Yeah, because they're all like A Court of blank and blank until the 5th, and now it's just A Court of Silver Flames. My brain can't handle this.
Like she messed with her own brand. Yeah.
Yeah.
This was like, not to like sound mean or anything, because I wasn't a big fan of Throne of Glass either. So this was kind of like my final attempt at Sarah J. Maas's books or her works. And like, well, I appreciate her writing in certain ways. Like, I think the woman can develop an atmosphere very well. Like, she describes the settings like in a very interesting way where like I can actually make a picture in my head. But I'm not a big fan of her characters, and like the development of relationships was also like one of my biggest issues in Throne of Glass also. And that's kind of like the 2 biggest things of why I don't think I'll continue with this, is just because like I already know I don't like how she develops these things in her other work. And so I don't know if I would be able to push through like another one of these to do that. Like if I already knew that going in, especially like with Throne of Glass, I read the 5 novellas in the first 3 books, 3.5. Yeah. And I finally gave up on that. And it's like, I kind of don't really want to dedicate that much time to this if I already don't think I'm going to like it.
Yeah. So are we going to go around and say our like final statement? Like, why are we doing this? Are we not doing this? We kind of have been doing this already, but
yeah. I'm very much on the fence. I really don't know. I kind of just want to read the Wikipedia page and like start listening to something else, because I mostly listen to audiobooks to go for walks and get out of my apartment. And like, not gonna lie, I've been like, oh, do I really want to listen to this? Okay, maybe I just won't go for a walk today.
Oh, dang.
So, okay, on one hand, 5.5 hours, but like, so I think I'm going to take a break for a little while. I'm listening to another audiobook. I'm going to listen to that. And then like, then I'll decide, do I want to, or do I just want to read the Wikipedia? And I'm not sure yet.
Do you think like trying to physically or like e-read it would be better than audiobook? Because like I've gone back and forth kind of. Like I got the library book, but then I also had the audiobook. And I didn't mind the audiobook, but I felt like when I was like physically reading it, I don't know, I guess I could just, sounds weird, I could stomach the cringe more.
If I do read the second, I'm going to probably read the ebook, not listen to the audiobook again, just to see if maybe that's it. Also, side note, this is the first audiobook I've ever listened to on more than like normal speed. I'm listening to it on 1.5 speed because it was just
I was going to ask, how fast are you going?
But yeah, maybe that might make a difference. I don't know.
Okay. I was just curious.
I don't know. I definitely don't want to read physically anything because that sounds like a lot of work. I mean, I already have the audiobook checked out. I think I'm going to finish this book. I don't see myself continuing in the series just because I have so many books that I'm so much more excited about. And the last YA, it's not even a romance really, book that I read of this scale was The Red Queen. And after 4 books of that, I remember just being like, let's think more. Like, next time you're facing a series like this, let's sit down and like make a decision with all different parts of life, like have a big conversation, a conference, if you will. Do we want to do this again? Because I didn't really love that one and it took me so long to finish it. So I don't really see myself continuing, but I think I want to finish this one just so I have a better understanding. Because I also, like, it feels so weird seeing how many people love it and talk about it. I also kind of want to be like, I know what you're talking about. Because I have no idea. And if I do finish and I don't like it, I will have a reason why I don't like it. That makes sense?
So, Lana, I need to tell you that from what I've skimmed, if you really want to understand what everyone on Bookstagram especially are talking about, you can't stop at book 1. You'll need to finish at least book 2, because I think book 1 is just set up for like things that happen. Because I'm not kidding, like literally, like everything that we've read in the first half, that's just background. Like when I read the climax, I was just like, I have literally no idea how we came from like point A to this point, because it is entirely different. So yeah, it's not going to really help you.
I think I need an excuse. And I think finishing the first book and not continuing is my, like, I am putting effort in. I feel like I'm doing something, like I'm checking this box and walking away. Otherwise, walking away feels too soon. I don't know. It feels like justified. I don't know.
I am definitely DNFing at this point, but I will.
You know too much already.
Yeah, you like already know what happens.
You just skipped to the 4th book now.
I am going to read the Wikipedia page though, and now that Nat has reminded me that such a resource exists. Because I didn't want to go to Goodreads and just read all the reviews. I was just like, nobody has time for that for a book that I don't even care about. So Wikipedia it is. But yeah, no, I have like 3 ebooks that I'm really excited to read right now, as well as an audiobook that I've just begun, and I don't have time for this book right now.
Fair. That's fair, yeah. I am also going to officially DNF, just because, as I've said, like Sarah J. Maas and I apparently we've gotten back together a few times now, and I think we're just officially breaking up permanently. Also, I got a notification this morning that the library book is due back, so gotta do that. Yeah, I will live vicariously through everybody else. I'm glad other people have found that they love this series so much, and apparently I am just truly a hipster and can't ever like anything that's popular.
I have to say, this is exactly why it's taken me so long to read this book, because I was terrified I was going to hate it and alienate everyone who watches me.
Well, now there's like
pros. Yeah, I get that.
Well, there's like 3 of us who you didn't alienate, because we're like, yes, we get it.
Everybody has different opinions. Everybody loves and hates different things. Like, you know?
Yeah, and it's so lovely that, you know, the series is continuing for the people who love it so much. They get to return to that world again and again. And yeah, it's great that you guys have that, because I feel like I have series that are just so dear to my heart that I know that if I went back and went like the way I read this book very critically, I might have, you know, might find a lot of things that are wrong with it and whatever, but it brings me joy. And it's so great that it found its audience that loves it so much.
I think also that's a good like comment I can add on, is the like reading critically aspect, because I was talking about this with a friend who she's read the series and she enjoyed it, but like she blasts through books. Like she is instant gratification. I read it, I put it down, I don't remember anything else about it. So when I was like talking about this with her, she was like, did that happen? I don't remember that happening. I did it? I don't know. And then I commented, I was like, you gave this 5 stars on Goodreads. And she goes, I enjoyed it in the moment, but I didn't think about anything that was happening. And it's like, I guess that is also part of it, is like different people read differently. Like I wouldn't call myself a critical reader, but I definitely read into everything that I read. Whereas like other people, if they don't really think about it, they're just pure reading for enjoyment and escapism. Like apparently this might be a great book for you then, just like other fantasies usually are. So
that's so interesting, because there are books that I read that I guess there's a part of me that's a little ashamed of them, or it's like, oh, this is not literature. This is for me, for like fun times when I don't want to think of anything, just want to be entertained. Mostly like fun, stupid, smutty romances. And do I ever go in and be like, oh, the characterization is not very good in this one? No, I don't care. I have very little expectation, because this is just for entertainment. This is just to pass the time and escape into a different world. So I wonder if, you know, because we read it critically, this is not a book to read critically. I don't know.
I don't think I actually tried to read this critically. I think I just read it the way I usually do. And I was just like, what is this nonsense? So I don't know. I don't know who this book is for. But I can say that if you read it, then you're either going to love it or you're not. And the people that, you know, like this clearly, like this Mo, this Lady Jane, they really love it. So yeah.
We love you guys. Thank you for watching this.
Yeah, and thank you for watching us sit here and trash it. so sorry.
Yeah, and I just finished a book that's like a YA. It's not really. It's YA, like new. Let's say new adult. It's not even like smutty. It's fantasy. There's like a romance in it, and it's so stupid. It's not well done at all. And I was reading it and like, this is not good, but I like it. I like it. It's stupid. I love it. And I didn't feel this way about this book. So maybe I was expecting too much because of the hype. I don't know.
That's always a thing too,
I think was part of it for me, is like when everyone talks about how amazing it is, it's harder to just go in and be like, this is going to be fun and like, I'm going to fly through it and have fun with it, but not think about it, because I'm going, okay, this is amazing. I'm expecting to be blown away by it.
I actually, if everyone loves it, I expect to hate it, because I'm like, it can't be true.
That's great. I love that. Yeah, hype definitely, like, it can definitely break a book for you. Like that was a big part in Six of Crows for me, was like, I really do think the hype just got to me too much. So like my expectations were so high that when I finally read it, I was just like, oh, it's fine. Like, yeah, sure, whatever. But yeah, you know, hype, especially when you're a part of like the book community, it's very hard to avoid it too, particularly for like big name authors and really popular books. Like it's hard not to let that blur your expectations.
Yeah. Okay.
Any final
yeah, I'm DNFing still. That's my final thought.
Wait, Rosie, you're DNFing too? DNFing too?
Not sure yet.
Okay, maybe you and I will talk.
I think I need to take a break. Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a break and come back.
I'm listening to an Anthony Bourdain audiobook as well, and I'm like, yeah, okay, total change of tone, total change of topic for a little while. See if then, like next week or something, I want to just power through the rest. But
There you go.
Listen, I'm reading a Russian classic, which is so slow, and I'm just like, you have to read this. You're reading this for a body reading. You're Russian. You're like representing this. Read this. So ACOTAR is just such a great, moment of distraction. Like, I'd rather listen to this nonsense. So yeah, it depends what you're reading alongside of it, I think.
That's fair, yeah. All right. Well, I guess that's officially it then.
yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, thank you so much to everybody coming to watch us smack talk ACOTAR. It was a fun time. And I hope you guys have a terrific day. Bye.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. Bye.